Fortis, and many others. You guys have some very dense CVs. And so if there's something that you feel like you need to mention, you certainly can. But let's jump right into the business of certification programs and the state of affairs of DEI where you're from in the world. Whoever wants to go first, please jump in.
I can start.
Sure, Linda.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Espinosa Valencia. I'm originally from Mexico, but now I live in Canada. As Karen mentioned, Ana Maria and myself founded Ventura Collective. And once I was actually part of the second cohort of DIPs from the University of Georgia. And when I took it, I immediately thought, this has to be expanded. This has to go in different areas. In our case, we live in Canada, so we wanted to bring it to Canada. And in 2024, we plan to actually expand to Latin America in the Spanish version of the ISM based on the ISO. So the biggest challenge that we had is to actually, at the beginning, we wanted to partner just like in the US with a university. And that was one of the biggest challenges, to try to find a university or organization to want to partner, because they weren't actually knowledgeable of the ISO, just the way it is in Latin America or Europe. A lot of people didn't know about the International Standard Organization. So what we have to do is actually start talking with people in that sense, like learning about the ISO, learning about how they have standards for everything, related to manufacturing and cybersecurity, and how they are the benchmark for best practices in different kinds of parts of the business, right? So bringing that to human resources, bringing that to equity, diversity, and inclusion has been very helpful to make them understand that actually this is not only based, as you said, in the US, it's not only Canada, but it's an international standard that actually can be applied in different parts of the world, and that is made that way, to be applied. So in this case, Ventura Collective decided to bypass, these institutions that were keeping us, behind, to expand this. And Ventura Collective, with in partnership with Inclusion Corporation, decided to launch the certification, now about to be finished. Our first cohort, shout out to the first cohort that is here. Our next week is the last week, and that will be graduated. And that will be the first cohort in Canada.
Wonderful. What are some of the examples of legal action taken in the name of equity, diversity, and inclusion in Canada presently? Anna, can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Karen, for that question. We tend to think of Canada as not a very litigation-oriented country or region, but things are changing. And we believe the ISO standard, as James was explaining and as Espinosa was explaining, is changing that narrative, because it's bringing up a standardization and moving from good intentions towards action. So I think that is very much what's happening right now in Canada. We have one of the largest class action lawsuits that Black Canadians are doing in the federal government towards against the federal government for anti-racism, anti-Black racism in the federal government. So that started in 2021, and it has been having significant impact. We have been listening through this Black class action lawsuit through the UN and through the members of that are representing that legal class action. We have also seen in Ontario one of the biggest cases that awarded an employee that experienced discrimination for about $2.5 million. That is the largest settlement in Canadian history regarding discrimination lawsuits in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So things like that have been happening, are happening, and we are really glad that the insurance industry in the States including in Europe, like Lloyd's of London, is already picking up on the huge risk that involves an organization when they don't have an EDI structure. So this is what we're seeing happening in Canada. So we are confident and we are hopeful that this is going to continue in this case, rightfully so, right? Disgruntled, discriminated employees taking action.
That's very good. I mean, here's something that maybe we don't talk about enough in the DEI space, and that's risk, the financial risk that is present when you have a lack of a very viable, rigorous DEI framework. And so the certification is not just something that we're going to use to leverage more revenue for our firms, but it really is the first line of defense against these kinds of risks. So the certification of folks and then firm certification is really what we are pushing. Zimkhitha, talk to us about what you have going on there in South Africa. You have a whole cohort that graduated. We're so happy and proud of it. Let us know what's really going on.
Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. It's almost evening here. So the challenges that we were facing, I was part of the first cohort, 2021. And when I attended this, I saw an opportunity because for us here in South Africa, we've more previously were concerned about BEE, which is your Black Economic Empowerment. And it was truly focusing on 3 areas in those diversity types. It was looking at your affirmative action, it was looking your Black women disability, and did not include other areas, other classes. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is broad, and it's a new sort of concept here in South Africa. So I saw an opportunity because I had an organization that focuses on LGBTI supplier diversity. And because of an affiliation with the NGLCC, we found there was a lot of corporates that are trying to bring in diversity, equity, and inclusion within the workplace and also within supply chains. So this then gave an opportunity to say to companies, look, here is a tool that you can use to measure your DEI initiatives. So when I started, I was like to James, I want to do this. Let's try and see if we can replicate the way it was done there. We tried to get some universities as well to partner with us, but that has been a struggle. I'm amazed to hear that, Linda, also they had the same problem. We could not find any university that was willing to partner with us and get this out. And until we then decided, you know what, let's then just do it on our own. And yes, we had our first cohort, I think it was September, and we're looking to expand and drive it next year. And also what we've tried is working with organizations that have corporate members. Like we've been working something out with NBI because they are pro-transformation, pro-LGBTI inclusion, youth, and all of that. So now the idea was that we pilot the ISO standard with one of their members or even 3 of their member companies, so that we can also have a case study that is South African based. Because also one other question that we usually get is, do you have a South African case study where this has been implemented and how has it been going? So truly for us, the challenges has been getting, number one, universities or institutions that can partner with us in doing the certification, and also now getting the buy-in of corporates to use this tool to implement the ISO standard. But what I've realized also is that it works on trust. You have to build relationships with these corporates for them to then say, okay, we are ready. So these parts, I would say this year, it has been about building those relationships with them. It's not an overnight decision for them. It's building those relationships and that trust so that then they are ready to engage with us. We are getting there. I can safely say that we're 85% there to getting some of the corporates to implement the ISO.
Zimkhitha, you mentioned MBI. Please, for the sake of the audience, tell them what that means and how you partner with them.
Oh, okay. NBI is National Business Initiative. It is a South African-based organization that is focusing on different elements of inclusion. And also there's an element of also ethics. They ensuring ethics within the corporate sector. They also play a role in ESG, youth inclusion in the workplace, LGBTI inclusion in the workplace. So they have about 100 corporate members within their database. They had issued a paper last year, or also they do a lot of work with gender pay gap. I think it was last year where they released a paper on gender pay gap, and also another one called Transformation Blueprint, which was a tool, ideally a tool for corporates to start the journey of LGBTI inclusion as part of that. So now what they had wanted to do, or what they want to do with the ISO, is continuation from that paper. Now to get at least 3 or 5 of their corporate companies, which they had started the transformation blueprint with. Now the next step is going to be the implementation or the rollout of the ISO standard.
It's very good. As you can see, for all the participants around the world, particularly those who are not in US, just what kind of challenges people are facing, how they have overcome those barriers, being really aware of the context about which the ISO is being implemented where you are. I'm going to move on to ask Maelle. The ISO standard is published in French now. How are you experiencing the national and local government's willingness to use the standard?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Sure. And so now the ISO is published in French. How are you experiencing the national and local government's willingness to use the standard?
So the French environment is really different from what we can see in the US right now. The biggest challenge that I face right now is that companies are not really prepared to implement DEI strategy. There's a first step that we need to take to help them understand the definitions better, because I see a lot of companies talking about diversity when they really want to mean inclusion, and vice versa. So this is something that's really important to understand, because when I took the training, I thought that, I've been working in CSR for a few years now, and I thought that companies were going to be ready to implement, to take action, and it's slower than I expected. But what's really positive is that the government is creating, system processes that help companies take action on positive impact projects. So whether it's on the environment or social impact, and they've created infrastructures to help companies finance, to help companies pay for example, trainings or consulting in DEI. So that's a really good thing.
And so it seems like, no matter where you are in the country or the world, we are really facing the same kinds of problems with adoption of a new thing. And so awareness has to be, our first line of defense. Because something that we've mentioned, even in our DIP community, is that we might expect that folks who already are certified in the ISO for other things, cyber and safety and quality, that they would readily accept it. But DEI is a space for about 50 years that has been literally every man for himself. It's been I don't want to say the wild, wild west, but certainly it's been a space where people define what DEI is for themselves. And so part of what the charge is to all of us today is to ensure that we are on this awareness campaign that has the same language, that is based in the standard, to ensure that there's a better chance of adopting something that you understand. And again, even for those folks who already know about ISO compliance for other things, diversity has notoriously been, unstandardized. And so that it becomes our work to ensure that we are doing that work of raising awareness, and hopefully that translates to adoption. See your hand, Anna, I'm going to get to you in just one second. Neil, so India, let's talk about what avenues you've been looking at to ensure that ISO is adopted and implemented there. Please talk to us.
Hey, thanks, Karen. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a context about India as a country per se. I think we are comparatively advanced compared to certain other regions across the globe when it comes to embracing DEI. We have, as a part of our constitution, the right to equality that is extended to all citizens. We have a regulatory environment that recognizes transgenders as the third gender as well, and that was recently passed as an act in 2019. We are the seventh largest country in the world, with housing about 18% of the global population. And the variety spreads across religion, race, caste, and sex. We're also comparatively advanced when it comes to affirmative action. And we have reservations to the tune of 63% in 2023. And this process of affirmative action started post our independence from the British colonization in 1950. So we have comparatively a stable regulatory environment that supports the DEI framework in the country. However, we've also had class actions across 1980s till the 2000 and until very recently. And these have resulted in financial exposures and risks in terms of the petitioner. However, most of this regulatory environment extends only to the governmental corporations. It does not extend to the private institutions in India. And the private institutions, the global multinationals that are coming in, they all understand and recognize the importance of having a structured DEI program that's measurable, that's expandable, and that can be benchmarked. However, it's like you said a short while back, it's fragmented and it's destructured. It's not in a proper structure as of now. So the opportunity of 3415 in India is immense, given the variety of DEI that we have, cutting across all the 7 categories of 3415. The challenge here, as I see, is organizations and corporations have embraced DEI in their own parlance and in their own definitions. Measurements and reporting, like FNS said, being key, is comparatively missing. There are no benchmarks that they can compare themselves against. So whatever processes and policies these corporations set up are considered to be good within their own internal framework. It's a right time to introduce 3415 with the scope and the vastness of the curriculum that it has, to introduce it in a structured way, whether in collaboration with an educational institution or solo, as an institution like Inclusion Score itself, is an opportunity that I'm exploring. There are a little complications here. So we have about 22 official languages. We're a union of about 28 states. And the language, the religion plays a key role in terms of how DEI is embraced. The rural or the semi-urban part of our country is not, it's still governed by a lot of caste, customs, and old historical traditions. And hence, the primary focus area that I'm looking at is one, looking at customizing the curriculum to embrace across the categories of diversity in India. And the other is to look at introducing this as an institutionalized framework across the more urban regions, and then gradually look at cascading that down to the semi-urban and the rural regions. And by the time we are possibly able to introduce this in India and take it a step at a time, I'm sure there would be academic institutions like University of Georgia, and there are some reputed ones in India who would want to embrace this as a part of their curriculum offering to not just students but to working professionals and individuals as well. You're on mute.
You're even echoing what James is saying in the chat, that multinational corporations are going to be the key to distributing this. So if we're waiting on governments, we certainly have to, regard compliance. But if we're waiting for the government to push something, even in the U.S., we'll be waiting. But what we can do is work in the spaces that we occupy to ensure that, like every other business practice, compliance is there. The government has a space in this. But the professionals and practitioners are going to be the ones who really ensure that this is adopted, and not just from the risk, space, but because of all the good business that it can do, like all the diverse research that is out there about how diverse teams operate, how they produce more and better. That has to be part of our sales pitch to ensure that this is getting, out to the broadest audience possible. Had a couple of questions. Oh, panelists, just make sure that you're sharing your LinkedIn to everybody so that we could benefit from connecting with you. But do know, everyone, that you can join the DIP community on LinkedIn, not just the panelists, but all of the people that have been certified in DIP, and even folks who are, considering it. You can join a conversation with folks who have done it. Certified already, moving on to bring some depth to their firm so that they can go after different opportunities. Please join the community, because you'll see your industry there, and you'll get to ask the questions that really matter about, okay, what is the low-hanging fruit in energy? What is really the key thing that will help us to get adopted in healthcare? And so that DIP community is where you need to be. Anna, you had your hand raised for a question.
Thank you, Karen. It is actually an addition to what everyone has been bringing up to this panel. And what Linda and I have seen in the application of the ISO-30415 2021 standard is that the ISO can align already all the supportive regulations that exist in the legal context of a country. Like, for example, our colleagues have been mentioning during this panel. We have based our DISN certification, again, in the legal setting of Canada. So we have been able to, for example, base the 27 types of diversity and the application of the standard based on the Canadian Human Rights Act, which is specifically the duty to accommodate, the Employment Equity Act, the Federal Contracts Program, the Legislated Employment Equity Program, the Workplace Equity Information Management System, the Canada Labor Code, and the rights for foreign workers. Now, in the US, we have used, and we can streamline what the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is bringing up. And in the same way, the United Nations, for example, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the International Labor Law Organization, all these can converge really neatly within the international standard 30415. So, in response to what Maelle was also saying, there are different avenues in which to start implementing the ISO. And we can already leverage what's already put in place in support of human rights. For example, the UN, if local or federal legislation is incomplete, the UN already, for example, recognizes the sovereignty and the right to self-determination for First Nations in the region. So what we have seen with Linda is that capacity of the ISO to streamline, to leverage everything that we have for organizations to feel that, you know, the necessity is there, right? The responsibility to abide to human rights, to workers' rights is already there.
Maelle, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to build up on what was already been said, is that it's really important for me to look at different types of audience. For example, I've been teaching students, MBA students or master's students. So they're younger, they don't have a lot of work experience, but they're really interested in, you know, learning more about diversity and inclusion, transitions, whether it's, you know, in the environment, social, etc. And what I'm seeing there is more of a long-term vision to change companies from within, because students are students today, but they're going to be managers in a few years. So that's really important for me to share the knowledge and to show them that diversity and inclusion can be really practical, that you can take actions every day. And I've also been looking at startups. I've built a program for an incubator that's sponsored by Google. And what's interesting here is that startups as well want to take action. They want to do things. They want to practice diversity and inclusion every day. And so that's why for me, it's important to look, you know, at different kinds of people that want to learn, that want to change how business is operated. And so I'm really glad to see that's also happening in different countries.
That's wonderful. Linda, you had your hand up, but I'm going to ask you to answer a question that Floria has. He's curious about the content and the structure of your certification program. If you could answer that and how it differs from UGA, that'd be great.
In France?
Yeah.
So we spend more time.
I'm sorry. I was asking Linda if she could answer that question.
Sorry.
It's okay.
No worries. Well, it's after we took the certification, we saw what are the things that we felt that we're missing in the Canada context. We thought a little bit that we needed a little bit more of time. So our certification is actually 6 weeks, not 4. And we included a case study in the last week. So we actually go through a assessment case. We will be doing that next week. That's our last week next week. And we included something that in the US is not included, which is Indigenous rights. In Canada, which should be everywhere in the world, but in Canada, Indigenous communities have been at the forefront of actually bringing accountability to the government and not only the government, but private companies, in this case, banks, because they have suffered oppression, discrimination when they just go and try to have a transaction. So we add the Indigenous content in our certification as well. What else can I think? We as well make a connection with ESG, talking about government and how can we use what is available already, environmental, social, and governmental goals that are already in place, and some organizations need to make sure that they are posting every year, that we can connect that directly with the ISO. And that's something that we do as well in the certification, where we do that connection as well.
Yes, and in addition, we also leverage, as we were mentioning, all the policies already available, the legal context to all the diversity types. And specifically, we go a little bit deeper in, yes, the regular concepts or the basic concepts of the DISM. And for example, in supply chain, which is another leverage point from government initiatives to create the domino effect that we all need for the standard. So our videos are a little bit more, I would say, pedagogical in terms of going a little bit further, as I said, in some of the basic concepts. But again, to repeat, we do put quite a bit of emphasis in that supply chain diversity that, as James has always mentioned, brings that domino effect, right? Creates that ISO standardization across organizations and across industries as well.
That's wonderful. Neil, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
No, in fact, I just wanted to add on to what everyone else is saying. So I think the ESG connection for DEI is key, given the fact that ESG is now globally mandated to be reported frequently. I think the other element also is uh, associating the certification program and the curriculum with the SDGs and specifically SDG 5 and 10, if I could touch upon that, because there are different pockets and geographies across the globe that are either lagging on inequalities, which is SDG 10, or gender diversity, which is SDG 5. So some of my efforts are going towards not just linking the program curriculum with ESG, but also attracting the corporations that I spoke of by associating the SDGs with the curriculum, so that those could by default become a part and parcel of the leadership commitment towards attainment of SDG goals and their contributions towards the SDGs as we near the 2030 timeline.
So we're going to wrap, we're going to begin to wrap this particular panel, but I hope that you can see that the through line is, no matter where you find yourself in the world, inclusive culture, diversity, equity, inclusive culture, and belonging is our goal. And we are doing what it is that we're practicing what we preach, and we're using evidence, we're using trend data, we're having good analysis of what we see so that people cannot resist and say that, the problems that we see in corporate spaces can be attributed to anything else except for the lack of diversity. And James will mention this later about the sheer number of claims that are brought forth in this space. And so that is a problem, but if we're on that awareness campaign to ensure through evidence that we can show that the lack of a DISM framework is what your company needs, we're on the front lines of ensuring that we can solve that together with legislation, together with lobbying in your spaces to ensure that we have some movement from the top down and from the bottom up. So Linda's saying that they partner with the Black Talent Initiative to bring awareness to certification, and that's the whole thing about no's. I mean, we're going to go to where people are already gathered to ensure that we're making the best of our sales time. So if we're going to associations and we're saying, hey, you guys are engineers, you guys are educators, you're in energy, you're in healthcare, you already are governed by these kinds of things. Bring the ISO, let us bring the ISO to you. That's another thing. So if you find resistance, partner with universities, Inclusion School will help you to take the certification to a firm. We don't have to have a huge number of folks, but we can customize it for whatever it is that they need and ensure that we are graduating more people in the ISO. So we got a couple more minutes. If you have questions, you can ask them now. People are excited about you, panelists. You're doing a great job. And if you don't have questions, we're going to end this particular panel, give you guys a short break